Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Joel, welcome. It's good to see you. What does it tell you that the president is coming back early to the White House?
Alex, it's great to be with you. And this clearly means that there's been some intelligence gathered about an imminent strike by Iran. It means that the president is directing his team right now on both how to ensure that our forces in the region are protected and that our allies are being made aware of what it is that our position will end up being if Iran does strike. And so a lot of activity. This really does imply that there's an expectation that the strike will be imminent.
Give me a sense of the content, the kinds of conversations the president is having with his national security team today.
It's been a whole of government affair, quite frankly, Alex, for the last 6 months, where the State Department, the Defense Department, the intelligence community, and other agencies are engaged daily on the crisis in the Middle East. And that won't change. For the White House, in these meetings, these interagency discussions, really all of our assets of national power are being brought into the discussion. So the diplomats get a message. The Defense Department tells our troops in the field what it is that we're anticipating. And then, again, our intelligence community gets its ear to the ground. And I think in these meetings, ultimately, the decision will come forward to the president about how should the U.S. react to a strike. Of course, it depends on what kind of a strike it is. If Iran does hit Israel proper versus some other assets outside of Israel, do they hit official Israeli entities, or do they hit civilian areas? All of that. And that kind of then that interagency process creates decision opportunities and ideas for the president to consider.
How about from a diplomacy standpoint, Joel? I mean, what kind of message would the State Department have for Iran, either directly or through its allies?
Well, we have a lot of ways to get to Iran. We have a channel through the Swiss in Tehran who speak on our behalf, and they pass messages directly. But we can, of course, have direct engagements and have had those over the past years where there are meetings from time to time. But really, this is where regional diplomacy comes into its most powerful impact. Our allies in Iraq, in Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, they all have a real interest in not seeing a war between the U.S. and Iran or an escalation between Israel and Iran. And they're the ones that we talk to, and they tell the leadership in Tehran directly where the United States is, and hopefully offer the message that this is imminent, but it doesn't have to be, that you don't have to strike, that there are other ways to deal with what you don't view as a good attack against your. Certainly that attack was from an Iranian perspective very negative, but there are different ways to deal with this. And so those messages are passed as well through our allies.
But in terms of not having to strike, Israeli officials, and that includes Benjamin Netanyahu, have said they will retaliate to any attack from Iran. How does the United States keep this from spiraling out of control?
What we are also having to do, and you heard the president talk about it with Israel, is provide support to Israel in the event of an attack, and also tell the Israelis that proportional responses are what's required. If it's true that they took the attack in Damascus a couple of weeks ago, I have no reason to believe that it's not true. That was a strike that was going to provoke. Now, they hit IRGC leaders who were, again, plotting attacks potentially against Israel and coordinating with Hezbollah. But these are very sensitive moments. And so making sure the Israelis understand that while they can have a right to defend themselves, they have to be proportional. Much of this depends on what Iran does. If it goes after official or military targets versus civilian targets, will have a significant impact. And the U.S. right now as well, we're telling the Israelis that we have their back related to intelligence, related to air defense, related to other types of assets that we have to help them protect themselves in the event of a strike.
Okay, there's that kind of action, but short of something happening directly on a United States entity, is there something Iran could do that you think would draw the United States into a broader war? I hate to use that terminology, actually a war, but broader offensive behavior.
Yeah, well, Alex, for the past half year, we've seen that to a certain extent where the Houthis have been active in attacking third-party commercial vessels, non-Israeli, non-U.S. vessels, and that has prompted some of our responses. And then, of course, the attacks coming out of Iraq and killing several of our soldiers in Jordan. That was a direct shot, and we responded militarily. And I think these kinds of responses are calibrated to send the message and to try to deter future increased aggression. And that's also what has to take place, is that if there is going to be a response, that has to be coupled with a direct message to Iran that this is a one-off or a proportional response, and we expect the same from you. The messaging and the communications diplomatically is just as important as the military response. And I do think the administration has done a very good job of keeping these responses against the Houthis in particular proportional. And we've seen over recent months a decrease because of that response plus the diplomacy in the lethality of the Houthi attacks, which is a good outcome.
Okay. Good to have you back on the show, Joel Rubin, despite these difficult circumstances. We'll see you again. Thank you. We're also going to have another report.